The Icarus factor comes just after our relatively recent time squared, which will be relevant soon. Picard says that the Enterprise is heading to Starbase Montgomery because of some concerning readout anomalies. Data think this isn't really a big deal and can be easily sorted out, but Picard wants the Montgomery team to look it over anyway, since they'll be there. Riker's confused. It wasn't on the schedule to stop there, but it's made clear in the conference room why they're going. Picard starts out by referring to an encounter at Farpoint when he was a bit of a grump at Riker's manual docking. I like this because once you hear what this is about, you can understand why the way he was, quote, miserly in his congratulations, as he puts it, came to mind. That he's been thinking back on the arrival of his first officer and realizes, maybe I was a tad on the grumpy side. I did strain my grumpy bone, that's why I'd be grumpy. Picard's reflection is because Riker has been chosen to replace the retiring captain of the Ares, a ship months away from here at high warp. But there's exciting things going on out there. He's got 12 hours to think about it, and after the titles, learns that an expert will be briefing Riker on the Ares mission. It turns out that the civilian advisor to arrive on the transporter pad is Riker's father. Riker's less than thrilled at this reunion, which is why Time Squared is relevant. He'd made the point that he learned to cook thanks to his father, not because the man taught him, but because he hated it, so made Riker do it. Speaking of hate...
Worf, did you hear about Commander Riker's promotion?
Yes.
He didn't know his father was coming. He was completely surprised.
So?
Can you imagine if it was your father?
I never knew my father.
And I didn't have a father long enough to...
Worf, you may be surprised to learn, loses his temper with Wesley when he won't shut up. He goes to see LaForge, who's already annoyed because while he said he was fine with the Montgomery people looking over his engine, the fact they're going over every detail that he already covered annoys him, for some reason. I suppose when you're a solver of problems, it might irk you when you just need someone else to check it over and confirm for you. Says, all right, let's see, LaForge. First off, did you remember to plug it in? Riker's hanging out with O'Brien in 10 forward. This is why someone else was operating the transporter, because he has to unravel what's eating at Riker. That's when Kyle Riker shows up and starts shaking hands with people like he's running for city council. But he kisses Pulaski.
They know each other.
No kidding. Well, I know her too, but we don't do that.
Thank God. Data joins in the discussion of Worf, noting to LaForge and Wesley that Worf has seemed out of sorts of late. Data thinks that studying Worf wouldn't be out of the question, but they put Wesley on it. You found it, you fix it. That's their approach. Back in 10 forward, Riker finally steps over, but just to note that Pulaski never mentions she knew Kyle, and tells Kyle that he's ready to begin the briefing. But Kyle isn't going to start right now, because after the commercial break, he's still there when Data and Geordi arrive to look at Worf. Wes has conned Data into doing it. Sounds like Kyle and Pulaski had a thing going for a while, but she moved on several times. But her 3 marriages all ended amicably, of course. What annoyed everyone on this episode was Gene insisting that by the 24th century, we've resolved all those feelings of anger and resentment. As Michael Piller noted, now go write drama. This is why some of early TNG feels like it's actually Federation propaganda, or worse, Klingon propaganda.
Let me tell you how in touch with my feelings I am. So in touch I keep my therapist next to me on the bridge at all times, for I am a Starfleet captain.
Meanwhile, Geordi notes that there's nothing up with Worf, but Data says that's only because Worf is alone, and therefore there's nothing to trigger any kind of action whatsoever. Even Worf isn't going to stand in front of a window and start an argument with himself. Data figures he's just lonely and intends to solve that.
Excuse me, Lieutenant. You seem to have lost the will to communicate with others. You have friends here. We care about you.
Man, just look at his face during that whole scene. Dorn does not get enough praise. The man says so much with so little. Soon Worf arrives to speak with Riker, who's looking at pictures of his youth in Alaska. In this one, he's holding a caught fish, but says that he wasn't the one who caught it. After hooking it, his father took the rod away before he could reel it in, to make sure that Riker didn't lose it. I had no idea how life or death it was for them not to lose that fish. I guess they must have been on the brink of starvation or something that he would feel the need to do that. Worf's here to ask if he can join Riker on the Ares, given the risk of combat. I mean, it's called Ares, it's just possible. Riker goes to Kyle for the briefing, but is just handed a copy of the details, and then tries to talk about being a parent. Oh, Riker's not interested, even when Kyle says he's here with his hand out. Riker's not willing to listen. And honestly, I don't blame him. We've not heard anything to make me sympathetic, and if someone wants to reconnect, it's got to be something the other person wants too. Expecting that you have to reconnect is, frankly, sounding like one more way of trying to control. We're going to work on reconciliation because I've decided we will. When Pulaski arranges for Kyle to talk to Troy, she sees that there is actually some jealousy towards Riker's success. Kyle may have a reputation for excellence, but Riker has climbed higher, faster, and Troy notes he's actually quite competitive with his own son. Riker's discussion of the mission with Picard is interrupted by Kyle's arrival.
I want you to know I'm here if you need me.
I've been on my own since I was 15. I can take care of myself.
Please, spare me the pain of your childhood.
Guy's working really hard to win over the audience. Then in engineering...
Shorty, I figured out Worf's problem. You spoke to him?
Am I the only one that laughed at that answer? I know what's bothering him. Talking to you? Wesley says that it's the 10th anniversary of Worf's Age of Ascension, and Worf is supposed to be celebrating this day with his fellow Klingons. So they decide to help out. They're going to create holographic Klingons to carry out the ritual, while they provide the moral support for Worf during the ceremony. There is no part of this plan that sounds doomed. Well, Riker goes to see Pulaski and apologizes for his remark. Her personal life isn't his business. She admits that she once considered marrying Kyle. She once saw him endure something that was, well, so terrible it broke everyone else. But he had other priorities besides marriage.
You know, if I were you, going out on the Ares, I'd jettison the emotional baggage you're still carrying around.
The advice of the Gorgon, always a winner for me. I don't see how reconciliation is possible. Riker is estranged from his father because all the time while growing up, the man was a self-centered ass. Now he's back to announce that he's changed. He's a self-centered ass that the doctor wants to fuck. Ugh, that was a mistake. Now I need to flush that mental image from my brain.
That would entail the use of Klingon painstix.
Fine, so long as it works. Riker goes to see Picard about the Ares, and Picard lays out why being conflicted about taking the captaincy makes sense. In his current role, Riker holds a prestigious position, second in command of the flagship, versus some practically anonymous captaincy in a remote location. Essentially, Picard is saying 'tis better to reign in obscurity than to be an assistant in the spotlight. Everything I'm encountering with this episode is that the stuff unrelated to the father-son conflict is enjoyable, and that part of it just sucks.
If I were not a consummate professional and an android, I would find this entire procedure insulting.
Even the conversation between Riker and Troy, trying to be professional about him leaving when there's lots of emotions underneath, that's fine. But then they have to go back to the plot with Kyle, and I don't see the slightest reason to give the guy an inch. You need to jettison the emotional baggage if the situation requires it, yes. If, say, they were both having to go on the Ares. But that's for circumstance, not because it simply has to be done. No one is entitled to reconciliation. And keep in mind, I have a great relationship with my parents and my kids, so this isn't me projecting here. As someone with absolutely no baggage whatsoever, I still say, fuck this guy. Well, Kyle challenges Riker to a physical confrontation, and Pulaski calls Kyle in to ask WTF.
But Will is in his prime.
And I'm no spring chicken. I know. Don't worry. He's never been able to beat me.
Yeah, I'm sure you losing a fight is what's weighing on her mind. We shift over to the Worf plot, where the room is readied with holographic Klingons ready to bring the pain. Troy brings him to the holodeck, making clear they know what day this is, and is he ever surprised by what they've done? And pleased.
I must show you my heart. I travel the river of blood.
Going to be pissing a river of blood if they keep jabbing him in the kidneys. Worf goes through the entire gauntlet, crying out Klingon declarations while being jabbed the whole way. So, who wants to take a turn? Well, Worf has completed the ritual and feels fulfilled, especially since he shared it with those who consider him a friend.
I'm just glad that humans have progressed beyond the need for barbaric display.
Judgmental friends, but friends.
In spite of human evolution, there are still some traits that are endemic to gender.
Troy then goes on to characterize all men based upon this, thinking that just because she's a counselor, she can pronounce universal judgment on all men. That she could just distill all of us down to our base traits. Just like a woman. So, time for the contest.
Anbojitsu, the ultimate evolution in the martial arts.
Ultimate. You look like you should be a palace guard on Blake's 7. They fight with the visors down so they can't see, instead using the sound that's made by the tips of their weapons.
Hiroshiko onegaishimasu.
I give them this. It's the first time cultural appropriation seems an appropriate description for something that is completely made up. The fight ends with Kyle pulling an illegal move, and Riker realizes that's why he's always lost. Even in his youth, the old man was cheating to win. For Riker's own good, of course. I don't even want to talk about this prick anymore, but this goes for the scene culminating in, well, let's just say the guy who came up with this episode regularly worked on the Love Boat, and that should tell you all you need to know. Yeah, a completely out of nowhere pat resolution. Riker decides not to take the promotion, and Data's solution to the instrument problem is what that army of engineers thinks should have been done. That's right, if we'd just have listened to Data and not come to this station, we would all be better off. I can't disagree. The post-episode follow-up. Annoying character, he's no surprise. What a jackass. Final score for the Icarus factor is 3 out of 10. The Kyle Riker stuff poisons everything it touches. I won't belabor that any further. Instead, let's talk about the Ares. Now, there's disagreement on what this should be. In the script, it was written as the god of war, but apparently other sources have listed it as being the constellation. I prefer the former because my sign of the zodiac is Aries, which makes me despise the entire concept of it. According to horoscope.com, an Aries sign will always tell you what they're thinking, with a frankness that may occasionally border on rudeness, which is great because it means I'm entitled to say that if you believe any of this bullshit, you are a moron. They're a combination of confidence and passion combined with temper and petulance. Speaking as an introverted Aries with imposter syndrome that frequently plays peacemaker, yeah. Okay, enough digressing. Suffice to say the episode put me in a bad mood. The Arsenal of Freedom established that Riker had already turned down a chance to command a ship, the USS Drake. Offering Riker another command when he has to turn it down, for the sake of the show, means that it should have been central to the plot. As Best of Both Worlds notes, Riker's repeated refusal to take a captain's chair is bad for his career, and for Starfleet since it denies the chance for others to gain greater experience. It's like the Tholians and why DS9 never had them on, because they never had a story that justified it. Giving Riker his own ship and him refusing needs to be integral to a great idea, not incidental to an unpleasant one. Part of what made Best of Both Worlds so effective was because that refusal was integral to a great idea, forcing Riker to look in the mirror, question the idea of playing it safe, and proving when the chips are down that he is the captain that is needed. While there are a couple good bits, they are overshadowed by the Kyle Riker plot. The plot concept here is completely squandered. As for the Worf subplot, it gives more than just Michael Dorn to get into Worf's background. It gives Geordi a lot more dialogue. He and Data both feel a little distorted from their normal selves this week. Geordi's not out of character or anything, it's just that he's got more dialogue and it's a bit more snarky than normal. But you could have put it down to him being in a bad mood because of the whole engine thing. Data isn't bad, it's just, he's not quite his normal self here. As for Pulaski, she disappointed me. She was there to provide an alternate take on Kyle Riker, but it is ineffectual because it never occurs to her, someone can have certain admirable qualities and still be a jackass. How many times have we heard about someone like Winston Churchill, Steve Jobs, or Thomas Jefferson having many great qualities, yet were decidedly lacking as parents? It's not enough for the world to love them. You're told you need to fall into line too. I was never a fan of Pulaski, and this plus her judgmental attitude with Troy did nothing to make me reassess that. The title doesn't even make sense to me. Icarus was tragic because he ignored his father's warnings and flew too high. Here's the father pushing Icarus to fly higher, and Icarus wary of whether or not it's the right move. Indeed, if we were to follow that, Daedalus should have been jealous that Icarus was flying so high so fast. Not to mention that Daedalus fashioned wings because he wasn't going to leave his son behind. Kyle walked out on his son. The only way the title makes sense is that Riker isn't Icarus. It's this episode that tried to soar and instead crashed and burned.
You choose your enemies, you choose your friends. But family, that's in the stars.